Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm doing a video on hybrid tanks. However, it may also apply for other hybrid builds like hybrid druids and whatever other hybrids there are out there. So I'll be going over my opinions, so it's mostly opinion based. However, there are some crucial facts that I will be adding. They're just fact. There's no two ways about it. So, what's the difference between a hybrid tank and a regular tank? Well, it's actually quite simple. Regular tanks are just for taking damage, and like Rayla. As you can see here, I'm taking loads of damage, but I'm not exactly dealing the damage that I need to do. Whereas if I did this on a hybrid tank, I would be dealing damage and I wouldn't be as tanky. However, hybrids like Soraya, she can pack a punch like Rayla, who was struggling more. Hybrids like Soraya are built to take damage while also dealing damage. So how would this actually be useful? Well, there are many reasons why being a hybrid tank is useful. One of them is simply player versus player. So yeah, a hybrid tank is really good for player versus player, because you can deal the damage to take things down quickly and effectively, while also blocking their attacks. And whereas how it's not very practical for many other things, there are other uses to it than just player versus player. I'm going to talk about how it's a good build for players that are learning to play the game. When you first play the game, I usually recommend warriors to go on a stat build, which technically isn't really a hybrid build. It's not the way I would build a hybrid build at any level other than this, but I usually tell them to do 2 vitality and like 3 strength. So I always lean more towards the strength side for leveling. So, and you can stick with that build. It's really good for players that aren't used to playing games like Celtic. Like if people have played other MMOs and stuff like this that are similar to this, I usually would be like, you can try and be without a little bit less health, but for players that are really new to the game, I usually say have a little bit of health, get used to the controls and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's really beneficial for it being more of a low level thing. However, I would definitely drop this before level 60, ideally, or when you start getting enough gear and stuff like that. I don't know if a lot of you were aware, but Rayla was actually a hybrid tank for most of leveling. I do not recommend it for leveling. I just would despise anybody to do level this way, because the issue with leveling and being a hybrid build was that I couldn't hit enough damage to make the most out of how limited time I had on Elix, which was quite, it made everything a lot longer than it needed to be. However, in my clan situation, my old clan, not Bloom, Eternal Life, but the problem with that was that we didn't have any tanks and we didn't really have any high level accounts, so it was mostly me that was the only warrior that could really tank stuff. So I was hybrid tank, so I could tank frozen bosses, DLs. I believe I could do up to EDLs with a good druid as a hybrid, but it wasn't ideal. However, if you are a solo player, hybrid tanks are actually pretty useful, because you can solo a lot more bosses, because you can do the damage sometimes before it can rage, and also you are taking the damage in without, well, being completely wiped. However, a lot of people do hybrid tanks incorrectly, and I do not want to show my PvP build because, well, I'm very secretive about that, but I will explain roughly do's and don'ts of how to make a hybrid tank if any of you ever have a need to. Because like I said, there are many uses, but for just your generic character, it's not really something you do. Like, your main shouldn't really be a hybrid unless it works for your situation. A lot of people have this thought of a hybrid tank being able to do both DPS and tank effectively. However, it is not like that. Usually a hybrid tank is not a 50-50 divide between DPS and tank. Depending on the usage of the warrior, it's usually more leans towards DPS. For like, you need to, if you're doing it for bosses, you need to take down bosses fast enough before it rages. Or for PvP, you need to make sure that you don't die before you even like hit any damage, or if your opponent is extra tanky. That is something I need to work on my player versus player warrior. Not that I have anyone to fight anymore, but yeah. So how can we actually do this effectively if being 50-50 is not effective? The effective way to divide it is to mostly have DPS. So the most effective way to do it is to have your gear half DPS and half tank, and have your stats mostly strength or mostly vitality. Like with Sarai, as you can see, she is mostly vitality. That does need to change, but yeah. However, I haven't completely abandoned the strength, because I have my gear that makes up for that, and lots of regen. But that's mainly with lower level warriors, because I is level 50, 60. I cannot speak today. So, key takeaways for this video is to never make a hybrid tank 50-50. It is not effective for endgame unless there are situations where you need that. And it is not a perfect divide that will make you be able to do both tanking and DPS effectively at bosses. However, it can be a useful way to play if you're new to any sort of MMO games like Celtic. Thank you for listening to today's video. I'm sorry, the last bit of this video I have done it like months after the original parts, because I went on my long break of disappearing. But I will be trying to make more videos, as I need to stop putting off editing. subscribe for more Celtic videos.